Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to another Wednesday episode of the podcast all the big kids are talking about. We're talking about the Dollar Bin Bandits on this September 21st. I am Joe Marcello.
I'm Warren Phillips.
I'm Mike Farah.
And today we're bringing you our interview with a letterer, an illustrator, and a producer. This man does it all. We're talking about Chris Eliopoulos. Chris has worked on a lot of great projects. We're talking about comics, children's books, but you probably know his work, his most recent work, that is, Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum on PBS. My kids love it. I got into it. I love it. And I love this interview.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make this one, but I know Chris from his long run as a letterer on Savage Dragon. He came up with some incredible fonts that are still used in other books today, and really a credit to him for what he's done for the industry.
Yeah, you may also recognize him from his great team up with novelist Brad Meltzer on the I Am series, Ordinary People Change the World. And that is a series of children's books featuring Chris's art that really introduces these historical and otherwise well-known non-fictional people as, you know, heroes in their own book. And on September 27th, which is the next Tuesday, they are coming out with their first fictional versions of this series, I Am Batman and I Am Superman. So September 27th, look for those. But in the meantime, let's talk to Chris Eliopoulos.
Doing well. How's everything going over there?
Great. We are very excited to be talking to you. And I'm going to kick it off with the same question we ask everyone. How did you discover comic books?
I started when I was about, fairly young. I don't remember the exact age. My father would take my sister and I to the local candy store magazine place. And he would always, every Sunday, and would say, you can pick out one item to have. And my sister would get a piece of candy and she would finish it before she was out the door. And I would get a comic book. And behind me on my spinner rack, it actually is a copy of that first comic book I ever got. So the actual one, like the one I got. So I've had them ever since. So I was introduced really young, and that 10 cents has lasted, 45 years or something like that. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So that was the start. It didn't last as long as things. I soon discovered Peanuts, and that just sent me off in a whole new direction. But I did come back to comic books. I think like my junior year in high school, I met a friend who, weirdly enough, is now a children's book author. And his brother wrote the third Star Trek movie in the Abrams verse. And
really,
we went to his house and he pulled out his brother's comics and showed me an issue of John Byrne's X-Men. And that was it. I was like, oh, I like this. I can deal with this. So I sort of relearned to love comic books at that age. So
that's pretty cool. Not many people can say they still own the comics that they originally collected. Like at some point, people, they get them, and for whatever reason, they part ways with them, and then they decide later on to get them back. And of course, they're different or whatever, like version
or lose them tragically, like Eric Larson.
Yeah.
His house burned down. He lost everything.
Right.
Even his own comics that he created as a kid.
Yeah.
All that stuff. He lost everything. So, yeah. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah, it was. Oh, there goes my camera. Not many people can say they still have them. Wanted to ask, again, comic book related, but what were, when you were reading, what were some of like the titles that you really found the most fascinating to get into?
Well, when I was really little, when I was getting them at the candy shop, it was Justice League, it was Flash, some Batman. But I think my 6-year-old mind was like, I can have all the superheroes if I just get Justice League. They're all right there. What do I need the other books for? So that was it. I will say though, my junior year in high school, it was really about John Byrne. I mean, I fell in love with other artists, but Byrne was sort of like the focus. So I saw the X-Men, quickly jumped and found Fantastic Four, Alpha Flight. I followed him around to Hulk and Superman. And in fact, later. I'll tell you a story about it later. But so I followed him. I loved artists like Art Adams and Bill Sienkiewicz. I was definitely an artist comic book guy. I loved it for the art as opposed to the stories. Mm-hmm. Whereas like something like Peanuts, I loved this, the writing and the art. So that has always stuck with me. But yeah, I was definitely a Byrne guy. Everything was Byrne. So
Chris, you broke into the industry as a letterer, if I'm not mistaken, mm-hmm. and have done a lot of work in that area. Yeah. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit, but I'm curious how you create a font system, because you've done a lot of that, especially as things were transitioning from, hand lettering to these, computer systems or typing systems. What goes into designing a font?
A lot of work. But basically, it's changed over the years as technology's gotten better. My initial foray into this is I literally lettered out like I would on a board, scanned it in. I imported it into a program at the time called Fontographer, which would convert those forms into bits. And then I would lay them into each. Fontographer had like little sections that each letter would go into, and you would just basically fill it all in, and then you would work the kerning, so the way the letters would go together. And there's ligatures, and there's kerning pairs, which means basically if you have a T and an A, normally it just measures the width of that box, but as you know, like a T is kind of empty on the bottom and an A is empty on the top, so if you put them together they look way far apart, so you have to finagle the system so that whenever you have a T and an A go together, they come a little closer. So it's little things like that. These days, I haven't been creating fonts in a couple of years now, just because I'm so busy. But it's more of I would create it on the computer. I would draw out the letter forms. I would, in Illustrator, and then import them out into, what's the new one? I have there's a new one I haven't even used, but it's just a different program. I have since lost all my skills when it comes to font creation, unfortunately, but I was doing so many other things. I just can't keep up with that stuff anymore, but it took a while. It takes a good while to make a good font that doesn't cause problems. Even still, we still have some problems, but what's funny is when I first created the fonts, everybody wanted them to look like the hand lettering, which was imperfect. And so I had created fonts under that guise. And because they would always say, it looks too perfect. You got to make it a little wonky. Nowadays, everybody has grown up on computer fonts that they don't like that look. And they want it to be consistent and the same all the way through, which is hysterical. But so people have fallen into the love of computers and how they create type. So that's how it's changed over the years.
Now, are the companies still, or some of the books still using your fonts? I mean, is there like a % of the market that is, Chris Eliopoulos' work out there right now?
So basically what I've done is I use the fonts on anything I want to use because I own them. I've licensed them to Marvel, and I pretty much give them the exclusive right to them. I don't have to. It's not in a contract or anything like that. But so my team, I have 6 people working for me, and they use my fonts on all the Marvel books. So, but if I were to go off and letter a book for a different company, I could bring my font if I wanted to. There's nothing stopping me. But just out of loyalty to Marvel and sort of our ongoing relationship, I try to keep it just with them. So pretty much every book you're seeing at Marvel that we work on is using my fonts.
Cool. Are there still people doing the manual lettering work?
I think for Walt Simonson's book, John Workman is hand lettering it. I think there's a few other cases, minor. I mean, I know with my children's books, I hand letter. I don't use a font, but I hand letter on my computer in Clip Studio Paint. So I've created some pens specifically to that task, and I create guidelines and I letter like I did in the old days, but now just on a Cintiq as opposed to a board with ink and pencils and pens and all that stuff. So yeah, it's pretty much a dying art, unfortunately. I learned my lesson. And I think they did too. Marvel, Nick Lowe had asked me for an upcoming Spider-Man book. There was supposed to be a certain look to the book. It was supposed to look like an old Crazy Cat comic strip. And he's like, we need it to look hand lettered back in like 1913. And I want you to do it. So I said, all right, I can do it on my computer, but like the script has to be perfect. There has to be no edits because it's going to be a nightmare to make changes. And of course, he's like, I promise nothing will go wrong. And then there were a bunch of changes and everything was a nightmare. But I think they learned a lesson in that computer lettering is so much easier to fix things and make things, change things better and quicker and faster and easier than if you were to hand letter stuff. So,
we had the opportunity early on, I guess it was last year at this point. We had a chance to talk to Tom Orzechowski, who has been doing all of McFarlane's lettering for the Spawn series.
Yeah.
And I was always amazed because, what he does is an art and what you do is an art.
Yeah.
But, nowadays people just much rather, do it through, computers and stuff. But I just find it fascinating because I don't think people really, they take that sort of thing for granted. They don't realize that there's someone painstakingly writing all this stuff in.
Yeah. Trying to explain to people early on what I did for a living who aren't in comics really sort of threw them for a loop. You write the words, well, physically write the words, but I don't write the words. But, so what do you do? And, you sort of go back to the Batman thing and you say, remember when it goes smash, bang, bam, it's like, that's what I do. Oh, that makes no sense. There are people that do that, or we thought machines just did that. So it was like, and I will say some of editorial when we're on a quick deadline, think all we do is press a button and the pages are lettered. But unfortunately, that's not the way it happens. But yeah, I mean, and look, even on the computer stuff, it's painstaking. But back in the day when it was dipping a pen into ink,
right,
lettering it, re-dipping it, re-lettering, like, that. I mean, I was a scribe, like a monk in a monastery, like scribing up the Bible. So it's a much quicker process these days.
Oh, I would, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So sticking with lettering, you lettered the first 100 issues of Savage Dragon.
106, 108, 106. Okay. Yeah.
That's quite a milestone. I mean, I mentioned Tom, but still, that's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, it was the last book that I still hand lettered for like a year, I think, at least. Eric is a really, really good friend. And so I just love working with him. So I didn't want to quit. But at the time, I had started up my company. I was getting a majority of the Marvel books. I was doing a lot of them. Like I took the deal and was lettering, something like 20, 30 books a month on computer. And what would happen is Eric's books would come in, which I would hand letter. And those books would take me like 4 days to letter. And then I'd go back to computer lettering. It would take me 4 hours to letter.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, financially, this is killing me. Like, I can't keep doing this. As much as I loved working with Eric, it just was sort of a thing. And then he went off, and I think he got, I don't know if he got Workman first or Oars first, but the two of them took stints hand lettering the book. And then they weren't like sort of turning around the lettering as quick as he needed. And so he came back to me and asked if I would computer letter his book. So I actually went back on Dragon for a while and computer lettered his books. So, it was even more than 106 issues. It was a bit more than that total. But yeah, it was a long stint, but all good things come to an end, as they say in comic books.
Where in the creative process does the lettering come in? Is that, and I apologize if this is a stupid question.
No.
Is it like, before it's finalized or before layout's done or after, is it?
Yeah.
Because, you have to kind of, finagle those bubbles
Sure.
and everything, so it doesn't interfere with the artwork.
Yeah. So there's two eras of that. So there was before computers and after. Before, the system would go, the writer would write the script, the penciler would pencil it, and then as he was getting pages in, the writer would type up a lettering script. So it would just be like just the dialogue that's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then either the writer or the editor would do balloon placements, which basically on Xerox copies would circle where the balloons would go, would mark them, would edit the script and send it to the letterer, who would letter either on those boards. So I was lettering on actual artwork, and then I would send it directly to the inker, and then the inker would do their thing. Sometimes books would be late and I would do it on an overlay, and the inker and I would be working at the same time on the same pages, and then send it to the office, and they would have somebody paste it up. These days, the way it works is the writer writes a full script. The artist will draw it, scan it in. It will go to the inker, and then it scans in. And then those are sized and copies are sent to the colorist and to the letterer. And so the letterer gets the script that is hopefully edited and fixed and tweaked. We letter it while it's being colored. So it always seems like we're working at the same time somebody else is working. And then my company puts it together in InDesign and sends it off to the printer. So what happens though is we're like a one-stop shop. Is if the writer wants to make edits, changes, the editors want to make changes, or they have S&P corrections or anything like that, we will do them. And now it's become like every part of the process, we're going to get notes and make changes. So when I was lettering by hand, you turned it in, you never saw the pages again. If there were corrections to be made, they'd make little corrections in-house. But the point was to make sure that it was fully edited before the letterer got it. Nowadays, they have the ease and the comfort of knowing that it can be changed at any step of the process. Even if it's already off to the printer, if they haven't sent it on to the presses yet, we can still make changes and upload the files, which we've done. I mean, there's been issues where things went wrong. We realized something was messed up or whatever. And we can upload the files and get it to the printer, even after the due date. So it's a very fluid process these days.
Very cool.
I'm very interested in this transition from letterer to cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always a cartoonist at heart and just waiting for the opportunity to get going? Or did something spark in you while you were working on either Savage Dragon or another title that you're like, okay, this is time. I think I have something to say here in a cartooning form.
Yeah. Well, I discovered Peanuts, like I said, when I was a really young kid, and that really spoke to me. I mean, behind me, that you can't see, is a whole bookshelf of Peanuts books and collections and all that kind of stuff. Biggest Peanuts fan around. Wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up. Like that was the thing. I saw like the John Byrne comics, the comics that I liked, and I appreciated those. But my ultimate goal was to be a cartoonist of some sort. I wanted to get a comic strip in the newspapers. I was doing that in college. Actually, it's funny. I was taking classes in cartooning, and I was taking anything the college offered that dealt with cartooning in some form. I happened to take one of those courses was with Gene Colan, the legendary artist, and he brought us up to Marvel. And I went, well, this is close enough. I know the Marvel comics. I know the process. And so when I went in to apply for the internship, they brought me into the production. I showed them my portfolio, and it was all my major was graphic design and typography and stuff like that. And they went, "Oh, type. You should be a letterer." And I was like, "What is a letterer? I don't know what you're talking about." The only letterer I knew was, again, reading about Schultz biographies and stuff like that. I knew that before he became a cartoonist, he worked for a couple of years as a letterer. He was lettering these Christian comics in St. Paul. And I went, well, that's how he started. Maybe that's how I need to start. If nothing else, it'll teach me a skill that I can use for my comic strips. But my ultimate goal was to be a cartoonist. And so what happened was, as I was lettering, I met my wife, we got married. And then I realized that lettering was making me a lot more money than the non-existent cartooning process, career that I was going. So I kept lettering and making more and more money that way. And I was like, well, it's hard to turn down money when you're just kind of, because in those days that image thing kicked in at the right time, and so all of our rates went sky. Like I literally bought my first house with the money I earned from lettering one image comic, because I got a royalty. So my down payment was mostly created from that. Thanks, Ghibli. And so,
ask, which issue was that?
It was the Death Mate Black crossover between Valiant and Image. It was Silvestri and Jim Lee, so they both gave me 1% of the royalties on that one. So it was a nice, and I had to letter that book overnight. It was 30 pages overnight. So it really was like one night's worth of work. So how do you turn that down, right? How do you say, I'm going to go draw cartoons that nobody's going to buy and I'm not going to make any money on when I'm doing well? And so I kind of did that. And Eric and I, it was hysterical. Our wives hated us because we would literally spend about 8 hours a day on the phone together working. So he'd be inking, I'd be lettering on his book or whatever book I was working on. And we would just talk all day long. We'd had the headphones on and we would talk endlessly. And I just one day kind of was just saying, this sucks. I wish I could just take some time to do some cartoon work. I really want to do it. And literally without a beat, he said, you've got 2 pages of my book every month. Get started. The first one's due in 2 days. And I was like, oh, okay. So I literally got 2 pages a month, and I really didn't I had nothing planned. I didn't know what I was going to do. I hadn't been really fully cartooning in years. So I quickly just kind of wrote up a story about me and my friend from college, and it was published. It was just boom. And then, so I just basically created that work for a year or two. And that's sort of built up that way. So then from there, I'm still lettering books, but then, do you know Judd Winnick, author, illustrator, cartoonist? He had been working on these, the Complete Idiots guidebooks, doing spot illustrations for them. He wanted to leave to work on his other stuff. And so he recommended me. So I'm lettering comics and drawing cartoons on the side that new people will ever see both of. If you're buying X-Men, you're not buying Complete Idiots Guide or seeing my work, and vice versa, probably. But I had a dual career at that point. And then, and it was right after that I was up at the Marvel offices at that point, and they had Bill Jemas had taken over, and he asked me to be art director. He kept asking me to be the art director for Marvel. I kept turning him down. And then he had asked if I wanted to do a project, what would I do? And I pitched him this idea that I had for Franklin Richards, the son of Reed and Sue Richards. And he's like, nobody knows who Franklin Richards is. Pass. And then he eventually left, and they started to do a Marvel Age line, which was sort of for kids. And I was up in the office, and C.B. Cebulski was telling me about it. And I was like, oh, you guys should use this pitch that I told Jemas about this kid, And literally in the middle of the conversation, he picked up the phone and started calling someone. So I said, wow, I've bored him to death. And he was actually calling up David Gabriel, who's the VP of sales, to say, we've got another book for our line. So, and I started cartooning again. So it really was my ultimate goal. And I sort of got there in a very roundabout way. But basically, I guess because of lettering, I got there. So much like Schultz, I started lettering and then moved into cartooning.
So I wanted to jump into the cartooning aspect of it and your style. Very reminiscent of another cartoon that we've known to love over the years. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, it's I love Peanuts, and I discovered Watterson in high school. And they were very similar. I mean, it was the big-headed kids with little bodies, but he was actually a little bit more vibrant, energizing, energetic. The characters moved and distorted in different ways. And so I was just fascinated with him. And so just like a lot of artists, you start by sort of mimicking the people that you love. And sort of I've developed a style that's sort of a mixture of them. It's funny. It's depending on who you're talking to. I'm either ripping off Schultz or ripping off Watterson. So, I mean, but if you're going to rip off people, right, or be accused of it, you might as well rip off the best. I figure, like,
I agree.
I've tried as much as I can. I'm like, I try not to look at their work too much when I'm working, just because I know that there is such a comparison, because I don't want to be just like, but it's so in my brain. Like, I grew up on Schultz, I grew up on Watterson. It's hard not to sort of have that. I mean, I see it in other artists who do their own things too. Like, you look at Eric's work and you can see Kirby and you can see Simonson, Sienkiewicz looked like Neil Adams in the beginning. There's definitely people who sort of mimic the style of the people they loved and then hopefully graduate beyond that. So I'm trying to make sure that I am not blatantly just ripping things off. I'm trying to do my own thing. So if I get there, let me know.
I will say, as someone who has grown to, has appreciated your work over the past year or so through my children, it's something that's made me gravitate towards it. I enjoy it so much. Because of that fact, because of those two aspects that
the influences.
Absolutely. So I mean, it's also in combination with the fact that my kids are really appreciating it at this point, which all the power in the world. So
I mean, look,
it's great.
It's blatant when you get a call from the Schultz Museum and they go, we're doing, I guess he turns 100 years old this year. And so one of the new exhibits they're going to be doing is Schultz's influence out there. And they asked for a clip from Xavier Riddle. And then they asked me to draw up a piece of the Xavier characters and the Peanuts characters together. So they're going to be actually displaying that at the Schultz Museum in September. So it's kind of an amazing all turnaround, right? It's all coming around 360. So I guess they don't mind too much. But
I for one enjoy it for the influences, but I think you've evolved.
I hope
past the influences.
Yeah.
In other words, there's certainly a DNA or a legacy that you're tapping into, but you've certainly throughout your work have created your own style that is very much identifiable.
I'm trying. I'm trying not to. I mean, I still get the how many you should be paying Watterson and Schultz royalty lines from people, which I totally get. I mean, look, I wear my influences on my sleeve, but hopefully I'm charting new territory, trying to take it a little further, doing a little. I mean, it's harder. It's not like drawing a comic strip where it can be very barren and plain and, you can do it like Watterson would do these wonderful Sunday strips that were just gorgeous. I'm trying to fill 40 pages and, do comic book storytelling and then be realistic in certain aspects and making sure that you get the subjects right and you get the backgrounds right. And so hopefully that's teaching me to be a better artist and do enough things that are different that people go, all right, we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, by those people's logic, I mean, everybody then should be paying Kirby and, all the older influences, but they were even influenced by other people. I mean, whether it was comics or not. So I don't get that argument. Anyway. Onto a fantastically successful series of yours, which is what I call the I Am series. But I think the name is Ordinary People Can Change the World.
Correct.
And that is the series of kids' books you've done with Brad Meltzer. I'm curious about the genesis of that project. How did you first hook up with Brad and figure out, what this thing was going to be?
Yeah, this is like the one story where Twitter is actually a benefit to the world. We met, we knew of each other and each other's works in comic books. I didn't know who he was until he got into comic books, but I had known he had done, the JLA and he did Green Arrow and he did, is it Infinity Crisis?
I Identity crisis.
Identity crisis. I always make that mistake.
Right, Joe?
Identity crisis.
I just want confirmation. But yeah.
Yep. But I'm a big history buff. Like, I live in New Jersey, and my mother is a history buff, and she used to take us everywhere to look at every sign, every, famous, because like the Revolutionary War like happened in our backyard. Like, it happened right here. And so, like we would, drive over here and read this sign. It says, Washington slept here. And you just read all these signs everywhere. And I just loved history. And so he was doing a series on the History Channel. We were following each other on Twitter, and then he would do like live tweeting his episodes. And so I would write stuff, and we would go back and forth and became friendly. I think at one point he was telling me that he had like a little kid. And I said, I'll send you some of the books that I've done. I sent him like Franklin Richards and the cowboy book that I had done. And I just sent it over. And soon after, he's like, oh, my kid really liked the books. And I was like, oh, great. And he's like, I did these biographies for my kids. They were like 1-page biographies of the heroes that I wanted them to like to inspire them. He goes, and the kids are always wearing, like, they can only either get a baseball t-shirt, a football t-shirt, or a Disney princess shirt. Can we work on something where you would draw an image of the character of, the figure, and I'd write something and we'll sell it. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I was thinking of, like, there was like the Life is Good t-shirts they used to make with the very simple characters. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do something like that. And we sort of went back and forth with it. And we created some shirts. And I think he was starting to sell them, like when he was out on book tour. He would just basically take a luggage with him and put them out and say, anybody want to buy a t-shirt? And I was at that point, I had worked up this pitch for this book that became a book I did later called Cosmic Commandos, and Scholastic was interested in the book, and I knew nothing about publishing, and I wanted to talk to somebody in the know. And I got the note from Scholastic. We're interested. We want to talk, blah, blah, blah. And so I think I was either texting him or tweeting him, direct messaging him, whatever it was. I was literally in the middle of typing him, and I get this email from him saying, you know what? Let's do books. Why don't we work together on a book? Let's go. And I was like, say what now? So he's basically like, everybody was telling him, yeah, shirts are fine, but you're a book guy. You're a writer. Write books. The people buy the books. So he took the one biography he did of Amelia Earhart and said, turn this into a children's book. He literally gave me a paragraph. So just take these lines and turn it into a children's book. And so I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but all right, I'll figure something out. And we would go back and forth. I would draw up I'm going to have to tell a story this way, this way, this way. And kind of figured out what the characters would look like, how it worked. And I kind of hit on the whole thing that we should make sure that everything, because he's very big on making sure that everything about history is correct. So I had to make sure that all the backgrounds are correct, the timing of, like, if they were in a car, what kind of car it was, it had to be the time perfect, all that kind of stuff. And the plane had to be accurate, whatever it was. And we put together a little pitch. And because he's Brad Meltzer and he's like a #1 New York Times bestseller, instead of just looking for an agent, he talked to his agent and said, I need somebody to rep this. And she gave him the name of 3 children's book agents. And he basically interviewed them to see which one we wanted. And which is amazing, because like I tried for like 20 years to get an agent and nobody wanted me for anything. And so Jody, who became our agent, was the only one who said, this is really good, but the writing needs to live up to the art. The art's too much fun and the writing is boring. So I was like, score. And so Brad went back and reworked the script to make it work with the art better. And then once again, because he had like one of the best agents in the business, and him, who's one of the best pitchmen, public speakers you'd ever want to meet, they and of course, best-selling author, they got like a bunch of interested publishers. He just basically went around from agency to agency, and we got multiple offers, and we basically had to choose who we felt comfortable with. And I literally still have the email to this day. I saved the email where I guess they had just come out of one meeting, and he said, "Guess who just got a book deal? You, call me." And so it was like, just like that. It was like, okay, we got a book deal. Don't know what the deal is, but we've got a book deal. So really, so it started with us just being friends on Twitter.
Wow.
To make this short, the long story very short.
That must have been
Really
amazing.
Yeah.
An amazing feeling to hear that you have a book deal.
Yeah, I mean, I had tried for years. It's funny how different the industry is now. When I had started out, I was showing them, I didn't know how it worked. So I would send agents my Franklin Richards books and say, "This is what I'm doing now. I want to get into publishing. Can you help me?" And the publishers would say, "Give me a project. I don't know what you're doing here. Give me a book to sell and I'll sell it." So I'm like, oh, I have to make up my own book. So I started working on this Cosmic Commandos book and trying to shop it around to publishers. And they were looking at it and going, "Nobody reads graphic novels. We're not going to buy a graphic novel. Get yourself an agent and then maybe we'll talk." It was a very convoluted thing. Nowadays, people are getting graphic novels left and right. It's like one of the prime businesses. But so it was really hard for me. I actually got in a back door through Scholastic. I forget who the friend was. They gave me the name of like the graphic design guy for Scholastic Graphics. And I sent the pitch off and said, "Hey, can you help me out?" And he showed it to an editor and they liked it. And I got in sort of that way. But that one eventually fell through, which is great because I was already working with Brad at that point. But yeah, it was a great feeling after all those years of getting the door shut in my face to get like a red carpet entrance with, the trumpets blaring and, the rose petals following me in the door. So,
So is this how Xavier Riddle was born, through these books?
Yeah. So we had done the books for a number of years, and then Brad was talking to me. He and I were talking, and he's like, I want a TV show. We got to make a TV show out of this. I'm like, okay. And
start shopping around for agents for that too.
Yeah, I was just like, he goes, don't worry. He goes, I have my Hollywood agents that will deal. He's amazing. Like he just leads the way, and I just follow. But so he said, our first and only place that we're going to go for in the beginning is PBS. They are the arbiter of, good for kids. And we feel like our books are good for kids. And it's the only way, we really should make this work. And so he had connections to Linda Semensky, who was the VP of children's broadcasting for PBS. So we basically had to he wrote up a pitch that I did drawings for. So like even the pitch was done the same way we do the books, which was he'd write them. I drew up images for it. And I think we had like 5 or 6 versions of the pitch go through. Like she'd be like, "This is not exactly right. Try this. This doesn't work. Try this." We'd keep going back and forth, different styles of the characters. Finally, like her final edict was, "All right, we're going to option the show. We're going to pay you guys to do 1 pilot episode. The only thing we're going to tell you that we demand that it has to look like Chris's art. Everything else is up for grabs. Whatever you feel like you need to do, take with it what you got from the pitch, but it has to look like Chris's art." So that was it. So we were lucky enough to do that pitch, and and it's not something like you pitch it, you create this, half-hour video and send it off, and 2 days later they say, "Congratulations, you've got to see your series." It took months, where they product test it with, parents and kids, and they play the video and what works, what doesn't work. And then they finally said, "Okay, we're buying, but here's certain things that we want to see happen because we found that kids, didn't pay attention at this point, or you need to do this." And, but it was great. I mean, they've been great. We've had nothing but good dealings with PBS, with our animation company, 9 Story. They've been phenomenal. So it's been a joy, but it came all out of the book. So we always filter back to the books. Like that's our prime focus.
Are you involved in any of the animation for the series?
Brad and I are not only the co-creators, we're the executive producers. So we are consultants as well. And so we split the duties on that one as well. So Brad deals with, I helped in the beginning when we tried to give them, basically the books are Brad and I put together. It's two dorks like loving history and loving comic books and putting it together. And they had to learn what that means by dealing with both of us. So at the beginning, I was working with them on scripts, but really we divided it up so that Brad will work with the team of writers, the story editor, and works on that front end. I design all the characters for the show just because we might use them for the books. And then I work with the animation team, making sure they design the characters and they run the animation okay. I sit on every recording. I decide all of the voices for the characters. So yeah, we're really heavily involved. I mean, it's another career. It's like I'm working 2 jobs, if not more, doing this stuff. But it's the only way we can make it the way we want it. We started to let it go towards the end of the first season, and we weren't getting what we wanted. So he and I just jumped right back in the pond, and we're like, nope, we'll tell you where to go. So we're obnoxiously anal about our stuff. So, they want to kill us probably, but we just know what works. And so unfortunately they can't just rip our brains out and use it.
If it's working and, the audience is loving it, then
I hope they seem to be. The numbers have been really phenomenal. The games and activities we have on their website are like one of the highest attended ones. So it's been, again, just the whole trip has been, like I said, red carpets and rose petals at our feet. So
my children started listening to Ella Fitzgerald music. That's
see.
So as a result,
that's a big win.
Well, that was the point.
It's a charming show. I was like, this is great. I love it. My kids are remembering stuff. They're enjoying learning, and
Yeah, we tried to make it fun. I think that's the point of the books and the show. It's like you look at every other show, and it's like robots and aliens and superheroes that turned, we've got, I don't know, name a history figure that, that's just boring. We got FDR. Great. Like kids are really into that. That really gets them excited. Winston Churchill. Yes, he's right up the alley. Like every kid wants to know about Winston Churchill. But so we try to have fun with it. And that's the point, is to sort of get them interested in these figures. We don't tell their whole life stories. We don't play the moral police and try to pick out, the good stuff from the bad, but we do give you like what made them phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And now it's up to you to go back and find out about them and take away what you will from them. So, but I'm glad to hear that your kids are getting something out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, my wife and I feel good about it because there's so much other crap out there for them to watch.
Yeah.
And we're, a PBS family, ever since. So, we're always like, we don't want them watching TV early in the morning, like on the weekends, but if they do, they can only watch PBS, and they're totally fine with that. So,
yeah, funny story is, so we had to go to LA before the show launched to do what's called the upfronts. So basically is you promote to all the news people and all those kind of people, anybody that's broadcasting who wants to report on this stuff. But they also have like people from the stations and the people who donate, like the big the donations people. And they asked me to come talk to them like in this room. So I had like, big wigs of, PBS, and then like all the money people trying to sell this thing. And I said, the only reason I wanted to go with PBS is because I donated when I was a kid and I never got that tote bag. And
they come from viewers like you.
Yep. And so, they sent me a tote bag. They sent me PBS t-shirts. It was a sweet deal.
I worked at WNET out of college.
Nice.
And they had a shop, and you don't know how many times I was asked to buy tote bags for people in my family.
That was the thing, right? Like you would go.
It was a hot commodity.
It's a status symbol there.
Yeah.
I used to commute to New York City when I was going to school and when I was working there. And everybody, there was always the people with the PBS tote bags going to work, all the women with their little tote bags. It was, you had to have it. So, but now I've got my tote bags.
Yeah, inner child must be screaming, finally,
we got it.
Yeah, I was in heaven. It's the little things, right?
Absolutely.
For sure.
But yeah, big PBS family too.
So from this book deal, you got a dozen, more than a dozen, couple dozen books.
Almost, I think we're on 30, coming up on 30.
Yeah. A PBS animated series that is ongoing.
Yeah.
And now on, I believe the date is September 27th, the drop date. You are moving from historical figures to fictional figures or superheroes with I Am Batman and I Am Superman.
Should I show you? See these?
Ooh.
I can't wait for those to come out, by the way. If you haven't noticed. I
will say we're not moving on. I will say we're doing an offshoot of the main series. Like I said, our focus is always on Ordinary People Change the World. This was a way for us to go into the fictional realm of things. So we're not just dropping the other books.
And that was my question. So it may be imprecise to say why the switch, because you're not switching. It's sort of an offshoot, as you said. But I guess why now to introduce this offset? And what are you hoping to accomplish with these books as an offshoot of the Ordinary People one?
Yeah, so with the Ordinary People Change the World books, we learned very early that teaching kids about figures expanded their knowledge and it made them excited about things. Like, I can't tell you how many kids dress up on Halloween with our characters and carrying the book around. Like they gain this appreciation. One of the big ones was Lucille Ball. Her star had fallen. Like not many kids knew who she was. They were like, the book came out and people were like, who is this? And when we were dealing with the copyright holder, they couldn't see a benefit to having this book out. But what happened is parents who knew Lucille Ball loved it, picked it up for the kids and started sharing with their children. They started watching videos and there was like this resurgence of Lucille Ball, and everybody started to go, oh my God, like we're building it up. And, Brad and I always talk. And one of the things we were talking about is like, we were always sad that we love comic books the way they are, but we miss the fact that we can't hand these books to little kids. Like today's Marvel and DC books, you can't fully give to kids because they just either it's too dense with continuity, it's too over their heads with, language or violence or subject matter. We miss like having something to give our kids. So basically, just like these books were a chance to give our kids other heroes other than, movie stars and baseball players and, that type, we wanted to give our kids and other kids the joy of these amazing characters that we love as adults, as in comic books, but let them enjoy them as children and like sort of bring them into the fold. That was what I was doing with Franklin Richards. It was what I was doing with Pet Avengers. I was just trying, even my graphic novels, I was trying to bring young readers into comic books. I think, we sort of stuck ourselves into the direct market and it's not open for little kids. So we wanted to sort of find a way to open the door for them. And DC was really helpful and excited about doing it as well. So it was a fairly painless process to get them to come on board and let us do this. So hopefully we're going to teach a new generation to love these characters.
And is this just the beginning of this side stream?
I think so. We're trying to. So we have the third book. I Am Wonder Woman coming out next July. So, and then what we're trying to do is we're trying to pick up on other properties. We're trying to go around and reaching out to other properties. I think a lot of people are very timid and scared to just turn over their properties. When we did I Am Walt Disney, they were kind of dubious about letting us use, the Disney characters on a book they didn't own. But we had shown them what we did on Henson, who also had a issue and was worried, but we showed them what we were going to do, and the Henson family loved it. And so they gave us the go ahead, and then the Disney company gave us the go ahead. And so we're hoping moving forward, other companies will do the same thing. Other properties, other IPs will let us take a shot. The fingers are crossed that we'll start doing more and more of these books. I think it'll be more of a, one or two of these a year, as well as the Ordinary People books. So it'll sort of be like a, 2-in-1 or 2-in-2 or 3-in-1 or something like that as we go. So depending who we get. And so if your listeners are ever interested in a subject matter, please let us know. Tweet to us and let us know who you want to see. What other properties you want to see us do?
I Am Thanos. No, I'm just.
I did. It's funny. I did some work for IDW, and they had me do origins of characters for kids. They wanted me to write the origins, the Marvel characters, and they wanted to have a hero and a villain in every issue. And they listed who they wanted. It's like who I had to do. So it was like Spider-Man and whatever. Like I don't know who whatever. Doc Ock, or I forget who it was. And then they asked for Thanos, and I'm like, "Are you sure about this?" And they're like, "Well, he's really big," and I'm like, "He is like a murderous, like his origin story is horrible." And
he was right. He was right. I mean, let's face it.
Hey, it's weird.
We're not passing moral judgment.
But it's weird. So their edict to me was it has to follow the origin exactly. So all the origins, I couldn't deviate. I couldn't make up any parts of it. It had to be exact. But then they were like, "Oh, and then he kills an entire planet worth of people." Oh no, you can't show that he kills anybody.
I'm like,
okay. And then I'm like, well, he's in love with death. Like that was the big thing, right? He loved the figure death. Nope, you can't show death.
Could you just see drawing that?
I didn't draw the book, so like it wasn't on me, but it was sort of like, yeah, well, what else do you want? I don't know how to do this. So I did like 6 versions of that one, and I still wasn't happy with how it came out. It just made no sense, but
like some things just can't be translated to other mediums like that,
That's what's good about these books. It's the heroes. We're not doing any of that. We show the villains, but they're the bad guys. So
I was going to say you should lean into the Thanos copter part of the mythos. Everybody loves a good vehicle,
and the spider buggy. We should have them
exactly.
Jesus.
So we have a mutual friend whose name is George Costines. And he was interested. I'm not sure, this whole line of questioning may get cut, but he had a rumor, or he started his own rumor that he may have a cameo in one of these books. He didn't know if it ended up on the cutting room floor. Is that something we can put to bed, either yay or nay?
Let me check to see if it's in here. Oh, wait. Let's see if I can. It's backwards, so
he's right there.
He's right there.
God, he's gonna get a big head, and I didn't mean that.
Yeah, no. Well, I figured it was in a newsroom. The man works at the New York Times. You got to sneak him in, right?
Yeah.
Plus, he's a good guy, and
Yeah, well, absolutely.
You got to throw George a bone.
We snuck a lot of people in these books. There's like a whole page of comic book creators that I put in there. So
that's awesome.
That you'll be able to look. And that's what's good about this. So what we did too is on the inside covers. I know this is probably a podcast, right? It's not even.
We do video.
Okay. So we did I did a whole thing of heroes. So we sort of did one of those by number so you can see who it is.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then on the back, we did another one so you can see who all the different comic book creators that we put in there.
Awesome.
So
it's like the back of Kingdom Come. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's sort of like we're beyond the heroes itself. We want to make sure that the heroes got a nod. When we talk about these figures, a lot of times the people who created them or worked on them or made them great get lost in translation. So as part of this, we made sure to include the writers and artists and other people who helped make these characters great. We made them sure that they were in these books. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is a shared mission of ours.
Absolutely.
As what we do with these interviews and talks with creators. So
It's awesome.
So before we go, clearly you're not doing much. I mean, you're only creating TV shows and books and hanging out, really. But what do you have? What can we look for next? You mentioned the Wonder Woman book coming out next year, which I can't wait for because my daughter's gonna be all over that.
Yeah.
Are you going to be tour? I mean, and this sounds silly. I don't know if this happens for children's books, but do you tour and do signings, or how that works?
So for the first time in a couple of years now, for obvious reasons, I'm going to actually be getting out. I would basically do like Zoom tours where I would go to, like, when I go on tour, Brad goes to like bookstores and goes on TV. I go to schools. Like
Awesome.
I can get the kids because I sit and draw with them. We talk about the heroes. It's a whole presentation I do. It's really wonderful. And so finally this year, the end of September, I'll be going out on tour in Pennsylvania. And then the other fun, interesting thing is, so we got in connection with this this group down in Texas called I Write, and they did a whole thing for a year, reaching out, using our books to inspire kids to write and draw their heroes from Texas. So they basically were inspiring reading, writing, drawing. And what we're doing, so at the beginning of November, I'm going to be going down to Houston. I did the cover for the book. It's going to be based on our books. We're going for the Guinness Book of World Records. It's going to be a 7-foot tall book.
Wow.
And so when I go down, we picked it the book will be filled with all of the art and writings of all of these kids. We're publishing some regular size books. And then when I go down there, we're going to have the official from the Guinness Book of World Records there to make sure that it's legit and we get in the world record. And then we do like a gala and sort of a couple of events for the kids, just to promote reading and education. So that's exciting. And then in January, we're coming out with I Am John Lewis, the civil rights hero icon. And so I should be probably going out around then at some point. And then in March, I believe, we're coming out with I Am Temple Grandin, the scientist who's a big autism activist. So she's our first autistic hero. So unless you count Einstein, some people do. So those will be coming up. And then I have a book that I wrote and drew called A Little Emotional, as my voice changes. It's basically the story of a boy whose emotions come to life, like literally physically in front. So every time he gets angry, a giant angry comes out. And that'll be out in July, I believe, as well. I have a couple other books that came out before. The Yawns are coming and the Giggles are coming, which are out there. Let's see, what else am I working on?
Doesn't sound like enough. Really.
Yeah, really. I mean,
I will say our friend Cowboy is coming back in some fashion. I can't say what yet, but we got the rights back last year, so we're hard at work on something new.
Very nice.
Yeah, I've got so much. I'm probably forgetting half of the things I'm doing. But
more Xavier Riddle, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we have another season coming up. Awesome. We're working on that right now. I literally just designed another so basically the way it works is we make up a list of the characters in the order that we're doing it, and I will design the characters, send it off to the staff designer who designs the rigs, they call them, because it's almost like a puppet thing. so that it works in their system, along with all the props and anything else they need. So I keep doing that like every day, and we're auditioning kids every day for all the new roles that are coming up. So
that's awesome.
Busy.
I'm very much so.
Oh, and by the way, I do my company letters all of Marvel Comics. So.
Oh, and there's that.
And that's just a side gig, right?
Totally forgot about that one.
That little startup Marvel. What are
they do
doing?
all the work. I pay the bills. So.
Okay. So where can fans, both ours and yours, because we have like two, but you have more. Where can they follow you on social media and all that good stuff?
Pretty boring. I am at Chris Eliopoulos everywhere. So if you go on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm pretty much just Chris Eliopoulos. I know it's hard to spell, but eventually it gets there, I figure. And if worse comes to worse, go to Brad Meltzer, and he follows me. You can follow through that way.
Awesome.
If that works. So
perfect. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you.
Always a pleasure.
Very interesting, hearing what you have to say and all the projects you have going on. You have way too many plates spinning. So
I'm probably going to go back to work now.
Take the rest of the night off. Go ahead.
I have to get things done. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Big thank you on behalf of our kids as well. And
absolutely.
And kids all over the country. So I think you're doing very important work. I know my daughter certainly learns more from graphic work and introducing these historical figures through that medium, I think is really capturing their imagination much more than your standard textbook. So absolutely. We really do appreciate that.
Well, I hope they start to learn to love comic books based on these books. So
we're working on it. And we're back. What did you guys think of that episode? I loved it. Chris is a really cool guy to talk to. You can hear he's got a lot going on, all kinds of projects going on, from comics to all his font work, to the Ordinary People books, and of course Xavier Riddle. I mean, look, this guy, I don't know when he sleeps, but I don't care because he's putting out some great work. So it was a great chance to talk to him. Great interview.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed this one, but a big thank you to him, just as for three of us as parents, the books that they're putting out that are getting our children into reading and learning. And it's so important in this age of iPads and stuff to get back to books and to get back to reading. So people like him are so important in the world.
Love spending time with Chris. He has a lot of interesting and varied experiences in the industry and outside the industry. And would love to have him on someday again, even with or without his collaborator, Brad Meltzer. So that'll do it. I do want to again recommend September 27th on Tuesday. I Am Batman, I Am Superman. Go get those books. They are awesome. They may even feature a cameo from one of our past guests, a friend of the show, who happens to have at least one initial with G. That's the only hint I will give you. Thank you for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and we will be back next time.